Pastor Neil Eaton of the New Hope Chapel in Plymouth, Massachusetts, thanks very much for joining us. You had a chance to look over this Gallop poll. What do you? I'll just read a key paragraph from it, but it says, the percentage of Americans who report belonging to a church, synagogue, or mosque is at an all-time low, averaging 50% in 2018. The past 20 years have seen an acceleration in the drop-off with a 20 percentage point decline since 1999, and more than half of that change occurring since the start of the current decade. What do you attribute it to?
You know, there's a lot of contributing factors. I would say a couple of them is, number one, I think it's church leadership fault to some degree, not entirely. The other thing too is I think America got caught up with the prosperity gospel, and we abandoned the mission that Christ told us to go into the world, to be his hands and feet, to be engaged, to do what he did. And so the prosperity gospel made it about us and what we can gain. And so I think that did some damage. Not the only reason, but one of the big factors. And also, as leaders, we just haven't helped our people to get engaged in the mission. Jesus said, follow me, not just attend me. You know, we don't just want to get people to attend church. We want them to follow Christ. And that means that we do the things that he did in this world. They need hope. People need hope. They need peace. They need forgiveness. They need joy. And Jesus gives that.
One of the interesting findings to me is that religiosity is closely correlated to age, with older Americans far more likely than younger adults to be members of church. Not surprising to me, because as one ages, death becomes closer. It truly becomes a frightening thing. As they say, there are no atheists in foxholes. Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I do agree with that at some level, but we in our church are an exception to this Gallop poll, thankfully, and I only give God the glory for that. But we are seeing equal numbers of millennials with middle age and older people. We have a very multi-generational church, and I think it's because perhaps maybe we've kind of figured out what we're supposed to do. And I'm not bragging on us as a church, because I know a lot of healthy churches that are in the same place. But it is true that the closer you get to the end of your life, you certainly are thinking a whole lot more about whether there is life after death. And we're in Easter week here, the Passion Week. And Easter tells us that there absolutely is life after death. And we want to know Jesus because he was the first one resurrected from the grave, and he said that we will all follow him. So, yeah, I think you're right, Doug. I think you have a good point.
Is there among the millennial generation and young people, generally speaking, a sort of spiritual dearth, a longing for some sort of spirituality? In many respects, that generation has been the most coddled in human history. It was everybody gets a trophy generation. There is abundance of virtually everything in our society, from PlayStation to plentiful food. It's not starvation, which is a problem in the United States. It's the obesity epidemic. What are your thoughts about that? That this generation has been, maybe not coddled is not the appropriate word, but so provided for that they feel they don't need any sort of spirituality.
Yeah, I would agree with that also. The greater affluence as well. And just, we can have anything at our fingertips. And history tells us that doesn't always last, that cycles around. And even biblical history would tell us that whenever Israel would draw away because of their affluence and all the trophies and everything accessible, they drifted from God because the idol became money and affluence and all those things. And so God, in his mercy, would allow them to go through a time where they didn't have the affluence. And that's a merciful God, because it's usually difficult times that draw us back to God. So I would agree in some ways to what you're saying there.
I'm curious what your thoughts are about the present circumstances in which we are living in the United States. There's tremendous dissatisfaction, tremendous division. We're seeing it with, Antifa storming cars on streets, throwing bricks through cars, assaulting people on the streets. We're seeing it with the assault on the U.S. Capitol building. We're seeing it with cancel culture, an unwillingness to listen to people. What does that say about you? I wonder if it harkens back to the sort of chaos that you read about in the early Testament, in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
And that this is sort of a manifestation of that kind of chaos.
Yeah, in the book of Judges, it says that people did what was right in their own eyes rather than being concerned about what was right in God's eyes. And so those kind of things were happening, like you said, in the Old Testament, the book of Judges, and evil just prevailed. So whenever you abandon the values that God clearly gives us in Scripture, then we have to adopt some other ideology or value. And because we're void and empty spiritually, we are tripartite beings. We are body, we have a mind, and we have a spirit. And so the spiritual side is neglected, or they go into other spiritual things, like we're seeing the sneakers, the 666 sneakers. People are spiritual, so they seek some kind of spiritual thing. So I would say that, yes, because we've drifted away from biblical values, the gospel of Jesus, the teachings of Christ, abandoning. And so we adopt other ideologies, and we know there's some prevailing ideologies that basically there's such a hopelessness that we have to grasp, and at any cost, we're gonna try to see, Marxism is on the rise. So somehow that's gonna give us this utopia, which has never, ever been given to any generation before us that held to those things. It only leads to destruction, violence, chaos. And so I believe I'm praying for a revival. In church history, in the darkest times, God revived his church, and then that brings hope and peace to the world in greater degrees.
This kind of philosophy which you're advocating, it requires work on the part of parishioners, does it not? I mean, the avoidance of chaos and darkness requires discipline.
Yes, discipline in the fact that we return to a relationship. I like to talk about the difference between a relationship and religion. The gospel gives us a relationship with God through Christ, that we are accepted before we have to obey. And it's through that relationship that we begin to obey the beautiful values and the ways of God. And so, but religion, it sometimes empty religion just brings death. And so religion says that I have to obey before I'll be accepted. So we need to return to the gospel, which says we have a God that loves us. Jesus Christ made the way. That's what Passion Week's all about. And that we can have a relationship with him. And then we have to understand the work has been done by Christ on the cross. And when we let that transform our heart, his great love for us, then we want to do the work. So to answer your question, the discipline becomes out of an overflow of love, that how could we not want to follow a God like this? So that's why I really am dedicated to the gospel.
Right. And not to mention the whole concept of forgiveness, which is truly profound and appealing.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And we live in a culture now that is so polarized because we see the other group as the enemy. And so forgiveness is not pervasive. So wherever there's no forgiveness, it strengthens the idea that everybody's your enemy. And so Jesus was the polar opposite of that. He came and died for his enemies. As he hung on the cross, he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And the gospel is the hope of the world, and local churches that bring that provide a healthy culture, gospel culture, are the hope of the world.
Lastly, before we go, I just want you to quickly mention something we talked about on the phone last night, which this poll does not reflect the number of people who are being drawn into churches in the digital world through Zoom meetings, through online classes, things of that sort. You're seeing an increase in that, I understand.
Yes, and I think, reading that poll, I'm thinking there's a gigantic omission. Every single pastor I know, whether large mega churches or small, everyone is reporting that their reach has been far greater, that more and more people are receiving hope because churches had no other choice. They either had to die, and some of them did, or they go online and try to come up with an excellent online church service that engages people. And so we're reaching far more people than we ever have. And we're a pretty good sized church for New England, as New England churches go. We have reached far more people. So the good news is that our church has grown a lot through this epidemic and through this political crisis. And we're seeing people passionately now in-person services. We're getting more and more new people that have never gone to church are coming to church. So I'm excited about these times.
Well, that's a good way to end on a good note. Pastor Neil Eaton of the New Hope Chapel in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Thanks very much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Doug. It's been a pleasure. God bless you and happy Easter.